This is the magicwordpodcast.com.
Hello, this is Scott Wells for the magicwordpodcast.com. Boy, we have a lot going on here this week, and so I want to begin by thanking our sponsor for this week. That is Poe's Magic Conference, coming up August the 21st through the 24th, and it's going to be in Baltimore, Maryland, and again promises to be a really great time. I have enjoyed myself whenever I have attended that convention, and if you are wanting to make your magic a little bit stronger or a lot stronger, you can do it because they teach you some methods for storytelling and for accentuating your act the way that it should be to make it more memorable. I highly recommend, if you get an opportunity to travel to Baltimore to see and attend this convention, you should. It's just a few blocks away, walking distance actually, from the hotel actually, to go and visit the Edgar Allan Poe gravesite, which is kind of cool then also. Anyhow, more information on that will be a little bit later here as we talk with Vince Wilson about this upcoming convention. Again, August the 21st through the 24th, and more information over at posmagicconference.com. Also, this week, we are going to, in our conversation with Diana Zimmerman, we actually had recorded this before the formation of the Global Magicians group, and this is something that Tim Wise had partnered with the Los Angeles Tribune and has some exciting news to share with us. So I'm going to let him tell you about what's going on with that right now. The Global Magicians Hall of Fame Celebration 2025 is going to be sponsored by the Los Angeles Tribune. It's going to be at the Clark County Library Theater in Las Vegas, coming up on July the 9th. And this is something that is relatively, well, I say relatively, it is absolutely brand spanking new. And I've got with me the chief cook and bottle washer right here with me right now, who's put this thing together along with the Los Angeles Tribune, and that's Tim Wise. Hello, Tim.
Well, Scott Wells, delighted to be here, and all the things you do for magic. I really do great things for magic. We're both stumbling a little bit because my tail's wagging so hard about this project.
So this is something that is pretty new, and the reason that I wanted to put this on the front end here of our conversation today with Diana Zimmerman, because she is going to be one of the inductees into the Hall of Fame. Can you tell me a little bit about the awards and how this came about, and what's the Los Angeles Tribune got to do with something that's going to be in Las Vegas? A lot of questions packed in there.
Yeah, well, I'm going to try to give you a Reader's Digest as quick as I can. I got associated with the Los Angeles Tribune about 7 months ago, and this journey has been incredible. The owner of the Tribune, his name is Mo Rock. He purchased the Los Angeles Tribune brand about 5 years ago and has done a great job in the speakers and book market. And when we met, and I did a couple ribbon cutting ceremonies in Temecula, California, and, he says, we should make a Hall of Fame for magicians. And so that kind of kicked around for a bit. And just 2.5 weeks ago, we shook hands and co-founded this, the actual formation of the Global Magicians Hall of Fame. And then it was like, hey, can we produce a show in a month? And so for the last 14 days, and you can see the calendar right now and the poster and who's on it, that all of these people said yes to the event. So I'm excited about it. And Diana Zimmerman, Gabe Blackstone, Fielding West, and Howard Hamburg are inductees to the Hall of Fame, all deserved. And we got Lance Burton and Nick Lewin is going to present that award to Diana. So it's really nice that this is going to be right for her just before your broadcast.
Very cool and well-deserved then. And again, going to be on July the 9th. And for people who want to attend, who are in the Las Vegas area for that evening, where can they go to get tickets, or just show up and get tickets there, or what?
Yeah, well, you can get them there, or you can get them ahead of time. And I've got a good special right now, 2 for 1 on our midsection tickets. So 2 people can go for $23 a piece to see this amazing event. And it's amazing. Go to Global Magicians Hall of Fame.com, globalmagicianshall-of-fame.com. Everything's there. Just sign up and you'll get emails and reminders, and there's going to be a lot of stuff happening. And anybody wants to do a dedication page, if you see anybody on that poster and you want to congratulate them, there is a dedication page that you can actually get your dedication and buy a little place in the program to say hello.
It sounds like an excellent way of recognizing people who have contributed so much to our community, and I thank you very much for helping to put this together again on July the 9th.
The best part about this whole thing is that it's not an internal magic organization. It's an external magic organization, actually an external organization. It's a media organization looking into the world of magic. And it's really for the first time, I think, in my research that has ever really focused on it and given it this much credibility. And that's what's going to be great for magic.
And also, this is something that's going to be not a contest necessarily so much as it is about the way that it makes you feel. Is that right? Just briefly.
Yeah, this particular one is because everybody in magic at some point felt something enough to be motivated to learn, to pick up a deck of cards, to pick up a rope, to learn about magic. And there was a feeling that compelled the action, and the action was they picked up or read or learned. And everybody in the room that's a magician and everybody who's a magician listening knows that feeling because we're all still in it. And so that's what it is. How does magic make you feel?
Great. Again, Tim, thanks very much. I appreciate you giving us a little background on that. And
thanks for your attention, Scott, and your support. You guys have fun out there.
All right, we will. Thanks again, Tim. Wow, what a great evening that sounds like it will be with all of these great stars of magic who will be coming together to commemorate the global magicians. So this sounds so great. Thank you, Tim, for working and putting that together, and also for putting Diana in the light. And I am excited about putting her in the light this week with this particular episode. We happened to be together at the Magic Collector Expo, which was in Las Vegas earlier this year. And at the time we recorded this, of course, she never envisioned that she was going to be elected to this Hall of Fame. Moreover, the Global Magicians had not even been formed yet at that time. So this is something I know surprised her as well. And we would have talked about it had we known anything about it. So anyhow, congratulations to you, Diana, for this great honor you're going to be receiving on July the 9th. Well, we have a great conversation in store for you here this week, and another great conversation with another great woman of magic. Last week, we spoke with Connie Boyd, who is another Las Vegas magician and someone who is an advocate for magical women. And one of those, again, who definitely is a magical woman who is being honored, is our guest this week. So please welcome Ms. Diana Zimmerman here on The Magic Word. I'm joined today by someone who, in my opinion, is certainly magic royalty, someone who's been around for quite some time, and perhaps you may have seen her on some television shows back from the 1980s. I think in Mumbo Jumbo, It's Magic, and some other HBO specials whenever I had first seen her perform on television and had fallen in love with her, thinking she's the most beautiful woman in the world, and that has not changed. I still believe that she is, absolutely. But not only that, she's beautiful in spirit from the standpoint of everything that she helps people, and she's always looking for a hand out rather than hand up. I mean, she is looking to reach out her hand and help people who would be in need. She has been involved then, I believe, also with the SPCA, with the Humane Society, things like that, as well as someone who is in charge of or help to work with the youth at the Academy of Magical Arts with their youth program, and keeps that going on, and has been very creative. Today she is not performing as much, but she is a producer and creator and just a nonstop force in the world of magic. And I'm glad that she's my friend, and I am glad to welcome her today. Please welcome Diana Zimmerman.
Well, thank you very much, Scott. I have to say it's a mutual admiration society, because what you have done for magic and documenting magic and getting so many people on tape and on your podcast and everything is so incredibly important. So I think it's a mutual admiration society all the way around.
Thank you so very much. You make me feel great.
And he's pretty handsome too, guys.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you. So I want to talk just a little bit then that you are, the last name Zimmerman, of course, was Dick and Diana Zimmerman. You were not Zimmerman until you had married, but you maintained that name even after your divorce. You were divorced probably, 30 years ago?
I was divorced in 1988.
Or even further, okay, back then. Yeah. And just to get that out of the way, just kind of to spring forward, as I understand that Dick is not doing well. He's
not doing well, and we're very good friends.
Yes.
We got divorced. We were married for 20 years, and we got divorced, but we never fought. We had one fight the whole 20 years we were married. We never fought. It just grew apart. I was 19. He was 32. We just sort of grew apart. But we've remained friends. I'm very, very good friends with his wife, Tracy Doyle. And sadly, Dick has Alzheimer's, and he also has congestive heart failure, and he's not doing well. He's just one of the most creative people I ever met, and just
he has been very creative. And that's why I thought that the two of you were just a great creative team.
Yeah.
Because when you did perform, as I recall, like the TV show I was talking about, that he was on that as well, and a lot of times the two of you were on the bills as well, whether it was It's Magic by Milt Larson had produced, or other television shows, or whatever else. You travel a lot then together, and both completely unique acts.
Well, we were kind of a 2-for-1.
That's right.
I assisted him on his beautiful Magic Circles act, which I still believe is one of the most beautiful acts ever done.
And for people who are actually wondering, is that the Magic Circle you're talking about is that the one with the hula hoops?
The linking hula hoops, the little dancing ring.
Yeah, on the string.
Yeah, on the
right?
string, dancing ring on the string, which is such a charming little trick. And then the big hoop illusion at the end. It was very funny. You mentioned Mumbo Jumbo, It's Magic. So we're both booked on Mumbo Jumbo, It's Magic. Me to do my 30s act, which was with big records and the gramophone that Lance Burton, ended up doing. And then I was booked to assist Dick. Well, the producers of the show was not going to have the world's foremost lady magician working as an assistant. So they told Dick he had to get another assistant to work the show. So, and Dick didn't want to, because it's hard to train somebody to do that. I mean, all sorts of magical things I had to do.
A lot of things going on, yeah.
Yeah. And so what I did is I went out and I bought a black wig.
Now, how funny is that?
And if you watch Mumbo Jumbo, It's Magic, I looked like a completely different person. I thought I looked like a Puerto Rican hooker or something, but I hope that's not racist sounding, but a hooker or whatever. But the producer, I walked up to the producer and I said, "Hi, I'm Dick's new assistant." And he goes, "Oh, good. I really didn't want Diana to do it."
How funny is that? Didn't even recognize you.
No, he did not recognize me.
Well, that was one, as I recall, like Tom Bosley, I think.
Tom Bosley was the host on that show. And what a charming, wonderful man to work with. I mean, he was so delightful and loved magic, very excited about hosting a magic.
Right. I was thinking you get 2-for-1 when you're saying Dick and Diana, but also like today, I guess you got Mike Caveney and Tina Leonard. Another kind of you get 2-for-1 a lot of times.
You get 2-for-1.
Yeah, that's right. Can't beat that.
Yeah.
Now, you'd probably done a lot of other television shows. Again, the reason I know that so well is because it was one of my son's favorites. You know that children, adolescents, like to watch videos on a loop. It seems like, whether it's Barney or something. And that was one of those things. He just basically wore the magnetism off the tape. I mean, we must have watched that 1,000 times, over and over and over. So my son Sean was just, big in that. But there were other shows that I assume, like we on Mike Douglas shows and other kinds of talk shows. I did virtually
every talk show.
Did you?
Except I never did the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. That was the only talk show I never did. And they had asked me to be on it. I couldn't. I was in Europe at that time performing. And then, things changed. And that was the only show. My ex-husband did it, but not with magic, but with his ragtime.
Ragtime, that's right. I bought his album way back when. It was so very good.
3-time world champion ragtime artist.
Really? Is that right?
Of course, he did a show with Ian Whitcomb. So, called From Rag to Rock, which they did, for Milt Larson over at the Variety Arts Theater, and did all over the world. So we would have the magic. In fact, this is how I met Doug Henning for the first time. We were doing a lecture in Toronto, and this young hippie kid comes up, and he says, "Hi, I'm Doug Henning, and I'd like to take you and Dick for dinner after your lecture." And I said, "Oh, gosh, well, Dick's going to be playing at a jazz club after dinner, but you're welcome to come along," thinking this kid is only like 18 years old or something. He was actually 22. Doug looked so much younger.
So much younger.
So Doug said, "Okay," and he had a little girlfriend with him, not the lady that he married, but
Mars.
It was Doug Henning and Mars. That was it. Yes, great memory. So Doug shows up, and Dick and Ian Whitcomb are doing their whole, ragtime stuff and everything, and I'm kind of sitting there having listened to it for the 100th time. And Doug and I got talking, and he says, "Diana, I really have been trying to get a hold of Di Vernon because I got a grant from the Canadian government and I would like to study under Di Vernon, but he won't return my calls. He won't return my letters." And he said, "Could you help me?" And I said, "Well, I'll try. I'll try to." So we chatted some more. In fact, he was responsible for suggesting I get the Yorkie that I used in my record act when I produced the dog. Yeah. And we became friends. And so I go back to L.A. and I said, "Di, have you gotten a letter from a young man named Doug Henning?" "That kid, stop bothering me. All he does is call me, wants me to work with him. I don't know who this kid is." Doug and his, Di and his kind of cranky way. And so I said, "Well, maybe you should take a second look at that because you can get paid. What? He's going to pay me? And I said, yeah, because he got a scholar, grant from the Canadian government. Yeah. And so he's, well, tell him to call me again. So I called Doug and I said, look, I think Vernon's going to talk to you. So the rest is history.
Wow. Yes. The rest is history. I do know the rest of the story and everything. And he came out and everything and met for the first time and changed his career and kind of, was the direction of where he was going. Wow. That's an interesting story.
Yeah.
In all those different talk shows and everything that you did, now you had a unique act that was silent, I guess, but it was hard to travel with the gramophone thing. I'm thinking, for an example, like Marvin Roy, who had a solid 12-minute act, or Channing Pollock, and who could work the world well, or Norm Nielsen. That's a silent act, and yours was a silent act too. But goodness sakes, I mean, were you working with some smaller things that you travel with?
The original record act, I produced a little gramophone, and that was the original record act. And interestingly enough, some of the ideas came from Alan Wakeling, and some of the ideas came from Channing Pollock, and some were my ideas, and some were Dick's ideas. So I had a lot of creative help with it.
Yeah.
But the 30s act, which is the one that was on Mumbo Jumbo It's Magic, which I called the 30s act because I love 30s music, that was later in the career. And that was the reason why I developed that act was I was asked to do a massive show at one of the community theaters in Phoenix. And so we decided to develop that act. And then I did my own show at Lake Tahoe, at Harrah's Lake Tahoe.
Sure.
And so I had developed the 30s act for that. So it was never really intended to travel, that particular show. It was more one of those things you would ship it around.
I see.
Yeah. But the record act, but mostly what I did was not the record act. The magic community knew me for the record act. But what I mostly did was corporate. And there's an interesting story too there I can tell you about that. But I mostly did corporate. I did the pickpocketing act. I did the thumb tie. I did those. In fact, funny story about the pickpocketing is that Amelga Marcus, the shoe lady.
The shoe lady.
She and her husband, of course, were at the Magic Castle, and the whole Palace of Mystery, which holds about 90 seats or something like that, was full of Secret Service guys. I mean, men in black, and then they were there. There was probably 70 or 80 seats. So it's kind of hard to find just a normal person. So I get these two men in black types up, Secret Service guys up, and I'm picking their pockets. And of course, the guys are going nuts.
Crazy.
Over it.
Sure.
They're going crazy over it and laughing. And I felt so sorry for the guys, actually. And this little blonde picking their pockets and everything. So the end of the pickpocket act, I always produced the watches and gave them their watches back. I said, gentlemen, I have a little gift for being so kind, and thank you all for indulging me. And I handed them their watches. And of course, the audience screams. So I send them back. They get halfway down the stairs. I said, well, I do have one other little thing for you. Here's your guns.
Oh, no, really?
The audience
go for their guns.
Screamed. If you think about it,
today,
shoulder holsters are intended to come out, not stay in your pocket. They're the easiest things in the world.
They're supposed to be accessible quickly.
But just to hold up two guns. Now, today you couldn't do it.
Yeah, of course.
People scream for other reasons. I felt so sorry for those guys. It was just,
I did not know that you did a pickpocket routine.
That was my favorite thing to do.
I can't remember or know of any other female pickpocket. Ricky Jay and I worked together a long time ago, and I'm sure you had talked to Ricky on many occasions and everything. And I don't know what did he think about your act? Did he ever comment much about? Or did he feel like you were a
jealousy
competitor?
A lot of jealousy.
I can imagine that.
I was told unequivocally that women shouldn't do the thumb tie. Women shouldn't do the pickpocket act. Women shouldn't do all these acts. It's not ladies. Women.
Is that because women are not? They shouldn't be touching men's bodies the way men touch women's bodies?
So men touch women's bodies.
Yeah.
What's funnier than a woman taking things from a man?
Yeah.
Now, this was in the 80s. And of course, half the guys that I'd get on stage had cocaine in their pockets.
Oh.
Here's your wallet, here's your watch, and here's your whoops.
Yeah.
And a huge laugh out of the audience. Huge laugh. I always wanted to plant it on them just so I could get the laugh.
That's right. So we'll keep this and put it back in your pocket. Yeah.
But that was my favorite thing to do because it was the least boring. You never, being in the ring with a bull, you don't know what you're going to get and what you're going to do. So I loved doing the pickpocket act. And then I did the thumb tie, which I became really famous for doing.
Yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah. I do remember that too.
Yeah, and I worked that all over the world, anywhere there was English speaking.
Did you use like a samurai sword or something?
Yeah, I finished with the samurai sword.
I remember your act.
In fact, the funniest thing in the world is I had this really drunk audience up there, and the most sober guy there, I had hold the sword. And I said, no, whatever you do, don't twist the sword. And I had an agent in the audience at that show, a really big agent that I was courting. And so I get to the point where I'm just about to put my hands through. My thumbs are tied together.
Right.
And I'm just about to push my hands in. Just as I go through, that sword was really sharp. he turned the sword and hit the side of my thumb. And I was wearing a white gown that night, wouldn't you know it?
Of course.
Blood went everywhere. The audience is shrieking. And the agent came up later and said, "Love the new bit with the blood, Diana."
Yeah, I don't think I'm going to keep that in, though.
No, yeah.
Yeah, I hope you enjoyed it, but
I think I still have a scarf.
we have to stop that act then right now. So you mostly did corporate work?
Mostly did corporate, yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
So an agent, I assume, that
Yeah,
booked
well, what
you,
happened, this is very interesting. When I first got to the Magic Castle, of course, I was 18. And because I had won so many trophies as a kid.
You were under 21. How do you get in then?
Well, this is the thing.
Okay.
Because I had won, trophies, and I knew the Larsons, and they had watched me grow up. When I was 13, they invited me to their parties they would have at the PCAM convention. It was just incredible. I was very poor as a kid, so this was my escape from poverty. And so they watched me grow up. I won. It's so funny because I won, like, every time I ever entered. I won 13. I won my first award in Vancouver, Canada. Then when I was 14 or 15, I won my next award. And then when I was 16, I won another award. And then I went to enter again when I was 17. They said, no, you can't enter anymore. And I said, "Why?" And they said, "Because you keep beating the boys, and it's not fair."
It's not fair to the boys.
Is that kind of reverse DEI or something?
A little bit. Yeah, that is funny.
So they stopped. So when I was 18, I had saved enough money to come to the Magic Castle. I had $45, which wasn't much, but I had a carload of magic props and dreams, because all I ever wanted to do was go to the Magic Castle. So I get to the Magic Castle, and they let me in. It was a Wild West back then. Nobody cared. That Bill and Milt let me in, and I was there. And I had met Dick years before that at magic conventions, grew up knowing Dick and the Larsons and Marvin Roy and Ed Keener, grew up in Phoenix, Arizona, with Danny Dew.
Danny Dew, sure.
And Ed Keener and Andre Cole, who, Bob Gertler, who became Andre Cole.
Very well.
I mean, incredible mentors, incredible. In fact, when I was 13, Di Vernon spent a half hour teaching me the wand spin. He was there for a lecture. But, so fast forward, I met Cary Grant, my very first show that I ever did. He was in the audience in the old Palace of Mystery, held about 20 seats, and Cary and I became friends. But, so what happened is that, Milt had eventually, we developed the Record Act, and, with the one that you were talking about, not the 30s Act, but the original Record Act, the color changing record and the diminishing record and the manipulation of the records, like coins and stuff. And I did it on the It's Magic show, and they invited me to be on a Sugar Ray Robinson telethon. So I did it on the Sugar Ray Robinson telethon, and there was a young PR guy there, and he comes up to me, he says, "Diana, I'm so impressed with this idea of a lady magician. I've never heard of a lady magician before. I'd like to represent you." And I can't afford a PR person. I could barely afford to, have my pictures done or anything. And so he said, no, come in my office. So I went to his office, and he said, "I'd really like to manage you." And I went, "Oh, interesting." I didn't have a manager at that time. And I was struggling to make $300-400 a show. Yeah. I think we made $600 a week at the Magic Castle when we worked at the Magic Castle, but I was struggling. And I said, "Okay." He said, "But we have to change a few things." "Oh, what?" And he said, "You're no longer a lady magician." I said, "I'm not." Sex change here or something? I'm not. He said, no, you're the world's foremost lady magician.
We need a new title.
Yeah, he gave me a title. That was my first lesson in brand. That was the biggest lesson I ever, right then and there. Within 2 months, he took me from being struggling to make $200-300. He introduced me to the corporate world, booking me in corporate shows. I was a host and also as a performer and doing things. It wasn't just trade shows. It was meetings and galas. And so he did that. And my fee went from $200-300 a show in 2 months to $2,000 a show. With 4 months, it was $5,000 a show. Then it went up to 6. By the time I retired performing, I was making $15,000-20,000 a show. Wow. To do all because of a thing called brand, which is why I got so interested in becoming one of the experts in branding. And I did that a lot for my corporate people. But that's what really changed my whole, and he's the one that booked me on all the TV shows and got me booked on all the, Bruce Marin. He's an incredible PR guy. He still does a PR here in Las Vegas.
So it's not just PR, but it represents people, so he can get you booked on places.
He represents a lot of speakers for speakers bureaus. From magic, I segued into doing motivational speaking. And so I did a lot of motivational speaking.
With the main thing, title being what? What do you...
The magic of believing.
Believing, okay.
Yeah, and so what I used is, again, my current favorite Diana-ism. I'm big on Diana-isms, is magic is your foundation, not your ceiling.
Mhm.
And the whole concept behind the talk was whatever your dream is, it doesn't matter. You want to be a doctor, whatever it is, that's your foundation. Don't let
Mhm.
that be your ceiling. You can go so much farther than that. You can go so much higher than that. And it's Jason Latimer does this. You know, he was one of my proteges, and Matthew O'Neill, who's an extraordinary young
I
performer.
love Matt.
He's one of my proteges. And when I first met Matt, he wanted to have his own little show on, you know, doing his little close-up shows and stuff. And I said, no, I won't work with you. He goes, why? I mean, you've helped Collins Key. He's like 27 million subscribers on Facebook. You know, you designed 6 of the tricks that he did on America's Got Talent. Why won't you help me? And I said, because your dreams are too low. Now, if you want to fill theaters like Tony Robbins does, 70,000 seat theaters, then I'll work with you. And Matt's looking at me like, that sounds okay.
Yeah. Okay,
So
what do
we
I need to do?
completely elevated
Yeah.
his thinking. Same with
Mhm.
Jason Latimer. Completely elevated his thinking. The problem with most magic is that we set our sights on learning a next new card trick or learning a next new this, but we never think about how magic will benefit an audience. What's the benefit? My favorite, and I think the most incredible close-up magician in the world today is Mike Rangel. And you go, who's that? Never heard of him. Mike's show, I brought Beyonce's former manager, one of her former managers, to see Mike Rangel's show at the Magic Castle. And he does card tricks and rope tricks. It's nothing innovative or out of this world crazy. And he does them very well.
Yes.
But we're sitting there, and in his 20-minute show, you go from crying to laughing to walking out of his show thinking you can change the world. He uses magic as a tool to inspire, just like Jason Latimer does, just like Lisa Mena does, another extraordinary a person in the magical art. And this is what I try to teach any of the kids that I mentor, is you don't have to limit yourself to just doing trade shows and card tricks. People see a magician, they go, wow, that was fun. You know, they might say, how did he do it? How did he get that card under my butt or something like that? And then there it's done. You know, it's done. But when you see a really great motivational speaker or a great movie or hear a great song, I Gotta Be Me, it sticks with you forever. Magic has more potential to do that than any other art form, but we don't. And so I'm on this mission with the kids that I work with to really get them to think about how they can use magic to inspire and fool people, yes.
You had mentioned a story to me yesterday, I believe, about a child who was like 10 years old whose life you changed. Wasn't you that had said that story?
About, that the little girl with
Yes.
Jason. Was that the one I told you about?
Yes.
Jason Latimer, I think, is one of 2 of the most important magicians working today. I think Lisa Mena is another one because of Lisa's, the way she's changing lives in Africa and helping, you know, the climate and lives. She's an extraordinary person. But what Jason is doing, and he just signed a contract with the entire Unified School District of Los Angeles. I went to see his show at Fullerton. He does a show called The Impossible Science. He's taken magic as his foundation, but he is using it to inspire kids to become more. And STEM, is science, technology, engineering, and math is the basis for it, but still with magic. You know, so I went to Fullerton College to see him perform. 1,200 kids, ages 6 to 12. Now, you know how hard it is to entertain kids.
Sure.
I mean, of any age, let alone 1,200 kids and mostly Title I kids. Every race, gender you can think of, black, white, brown, Asian, what, you know. So I'm sitting next to this absolutely adorable little girl, big brown eyes. She's 7 years old, you know. And I got talking with her. What do you want to be? And she said, I want to be a nurse, Diana, and help children. And I go, that's wonderful. So a few minutes later into the show, Jason never talks down to kids. He uses very big, incredible word, you know, scientific terms and stuff like that. He brings them up to him. He doesn't talk down to them the way education should be, in my opinion. You know, and he used this big scientific term. So I looked over and I said, do you know what that word means? She goes, I do now, Diana. And then a few minutes later, at the end of the show, I said, so do you still want to be a nurse? And she said, no, Diana, I'm going to be a scientist and I'm going to help nurses make kids heal better.
It's just great.
In 1 hour, magic used correctly to inspire and change lives and teach kids that anything is possible. I mean, if you take the word impossible, which is what we do, magicians do impossible, it's just simply I am possible. And so, but Jason does that. And in 1 hour, this young lady, this beautiful, gorgeous little young lady, 7 years old, lifted her whole thoughts.
Right.
She could do so much more. She could be so much more. And since I grew up in poverty, I didn't know we were homeless. I thought we were just camping out, for most of my early life.
Yeah.
I thought, I wanted to be the world's greatest lady magician. That's what I always wanted to be. I didn't know that was limiting myself.
I like the idea. You're right that a lot of magicians don't, like Vernon says, we don't think far enough. We stop thinking. Or in this case, we stop elevating ourselves or thinking about opportunities or what we can do or make our magic stronger or to get people, I guess, emotionally involved and to impress people, to motivate people, I guess.
Absolutely, to inspire.
Yeah,
which we
that's the
can
word
do.
I'm looking for, is trying to inspire. I don't think that we think that enough.
You're so right,
Mm-hmm.
And we do. I mean, there's wonderful guys out there doing incredible stuff. Sleight of hand that goes beyond, blows me. Some of my junior magicians at the Magic Castle blow me away.
I was about to say, you wanted to talk about that, about the junior program. How long have you been involved with the program?
Well, I started the program when what happened was that I told you I was friends with Cary Grant.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm sitting at the bar with Cary one night and he says, Diana, it's just a shame. There's no way for kids to be involved in the Magic Castle. And I said, well, Cary, I've been trying to get a program going here for 4 years. And the board keeps telling me, no, not a place for kids. Don't want it. No. We had one day a week, 1 day a year, kids' day, and maybe a couple nights when kids could come
in.
But other than that, no way. Here we have the greatest magicians in the world, and kids can't be involved with it. That's why I'm here, is because of the greatest magicians in the world that came by Phoenix, and I got to meet them. And I would argue with the board over and over, and they kept saying no. Finally, with Cary, he said there was a board meeting. He'd recently been appointed to the board. And he said, you come with me. So he took me into the board meeting. Now, my ex-husband was on the board at that time, and he's kind of glaring at me because Irene Larson and I always getting in trouble with animal rights issues. And he thought, oh, God, what is Diana doing now? And the rest of the board is glaring at me. And Cary says, Diana has an idea, and I think it's a good one. So I stated my case again and then got the heck out of there.
Yeah.
Before the looks could kill. And 5 minutes later, Cary comes out. This is in 1975. Diana, they're going to let us do it. They're going to let us have a youth program. So we put out flyers everywhere. We held auditions at the Maskers Club because the castle wouldn't let us have auditions there. And so we had 100 kids show up, all boys.
Mm-hmm.
And we took 50 kids in. And that was 50 years ago this year. We celebrated our 50th anniversary. But it was a struggle even to keep it going. There were a lot of people on the board that didn't want the juniors to be there. They didn't like them attending lectures. And, this is not for kids. This is a magic,
I know that Long Beach Mystics kind of formed their own group. Was that because they didn't have the juniors at the time, or was it around that time?
There was no junior. There was a youth program in Phoenix where I grew up called the Rabbits in Her Hat Magic Club. And that's why I wanted to get one started at the castle.
Right.
But the Long Beach Mystics, in my opinion, ran even before, I had come to the castle.
That's what I was thinking.
And they were probably the greatest magic group of all, because kids can be much harder on kids than adults can.
Mm-hmm.
But when we started the program at the Magic Castle, many of the Long Beach Mystics, Mark Kalin and, a number of the Long Beach Mystics actually came over and joined our group as well. So now they had 2 opportunities. Because we used to go down and lecture to the Long Beach Mystics, and Marvin Roy would lecture, Dick and I would lecture. And so it was, it was really great. But when we started and then what happened with the Mystics too is a lot of the kids were growing up and going away to college, and there wasn't that consistency of.
There was nothing coming in behind them necessarily. It was a group that just kind of moved, and when they were out, it was done.
And today we have 2 incredible. I'm still very active in the program. I think in 50 years I've missed 6 meetings.
Oh, wow,
It's a lot of Saturdays.
Yeah.
Once a month we have meetings. But the gentlemen that are running it now, David Doyle and Steve Barnes, have just done incredible things with the program. And thanks to the Jack Oakey Foundation, Jack Oakey was a well-known actor, and David Sonny,
was he a cowboy? Was he a Western?
He did a lot of Western stuff. Yeah, he did a lot of stuff, but he was mainly a comedic actor and just wonderful. And in fact, a couple of the restrooms are named after Jack Oakey because David who manages the whole thing, has donated a lot of money to the castle, and good friends with Milt and Milt Larson. And so what he did is that when COVID hit, of course, Zoom became really popular. And that opened a door to allowing us to have international membership. And so the Jack Oakey Foundation paid for all the cameras, everything that we would need to set up international membership. So today, not only do we have kids that are bi, kids that are, trans, kids that are black, every nationality. I think we have 8 or 12 girls in the program, but we have kids now all over the world.
And so you're not limited, because when you said before, you can only take 50 in because of the space requirement.
Yeah, space, and also they had attendance requirement too. But now we have kids from South Africa. They tune in on Zoom. We have kids in Italy and Spain and all over the United States. It's like, oh my gosh, my dream has come true. So what Steve and David have done with the program, they're real heroes.
How big is the group right now?
We have about 50 to 60 kids. It runs about that. We keep it maybe with our foreign, maybe about 70 kids in the program right now. Yeah. And we're always looking. We have auditions twice a year. You have to audition. It's tough to get in. You have to be pretty good to get in. So, but gosh, some of the kids that have come out of that program are so amazing.
I do recall at Magic Live, I think it was last year, whenever they had the youth featuring them. And it's like, wow, these kids are not just good, they're great.
Yeah.
I mean, they have such strong personalities on stage. They project well. They were creative. It's like magic is in good hands.
Well, it is. And I think the biggest thing out of that is that the confidence that you see with the kids.
Yes.
They come in the program, a lot of them are, I mean, let's face it, the kids that get into magic are mostly nerdy. I was incredibly shy as a kid. We're not the football players. We're not the cheerleaders. Right. We're not the sports guys and gals. And they leave the program with this confidence and this, I can do anything. And that's to me, the real value of the program. Yes, learning better magic and upping your game. But the real value is they come out of that program. I mean, we have kids that are doctors and teachers, and one of our boys won 2 Oscars. He's won 2 Oscars for film. And Ben Proudfoot, he won one last year. Not this year, but last year. And, but you see the difference in these kids. And honestly, it makes me cry. I'm so happy, to see that.
Wow. It has gone a long way, and it's continuing to grow. I think that. So do you see Tannen's Camp as being some sort of an addition to your educational endeavors that you help with the kids? Or is that more of a competition?
Oh, no. In fact, we give scholarships. This year, the Jack Oakey Foundation is giving 10 scholarships for kids from the junior program to go to the Tannen's Magic Hat. And it is phenomenal. We have meetings once a month, and we have, workshops and stuff like that. But when you spend a week with your peers and guidance, and you're with them, and you're in a wonderful environment, it's the greatest thing in the world. I'm such a fan of Tannen's Magic Camp, and I'm so proud that we're involved with that. The kids come back different when they come back from that. It's extraordinary experience.
I've heard that very story, that they come back different, that they really have learned so
and
much.
They make such good friends there. And they get a chance to meet incredible people, and spend a week with them. I would have killed to do that as a kid.
Yeah, when you were that age, to be able to hang out with these guys who are, quote, celebrity magicians is like, wow, I can't believe they're not just hobnobbing with us, but they're teaching us their effects. I mean, Matt Franco, I guess, and so many others, who just were willing to share our ideas and things.
And the confidence and so this year we'll be sending 10 kids.
Yeah. And now a word from this week's sponsor. Pose Magic Conference coming up August 21st through the 24th in Baltimore, Maryland. It's a conference that you don't want to miss. If you want to add another dimension to your magic act by be able to tell stories and be memorable, this is a conference for you. You will learn all kinds of great stuff, but don't take it from me. Take it from the guy that I've got with me right now, who is my guest. He is a host, Mr. Vince Wilson. Hey there, Vince.
Hey, Scott. Thank you for having me back again.
Hey, you're welcome. So tell us more about what actually is the Pose Magic Conference.
Pose Magic Conference is a storytelling magic conference with emphasis on narrative structure, mentalism, and a little bit of bizarre stuff. But any magician or mentalist who wants to take their performance, take their show to the next level should come to this conference.
That's a good way of putting it. That's a good elevator pitch, I would say, so that way people can better understand exactly what it is that they're going to be getting in for. The last time I was there, Jeff McBride was a guest speaker, and this year, who have you got as the and of course, Jeff is fantastic as a storyteller. Who have you got this year who's going to wow us?
Our keynote speaker is Crystal Younglove, mostly known for her sideshow performances, but also a talented magician and a beloved performer in the Mid-Atlantic. If you mention her name to any entertainment group in this area, they know who that is. And she is a phenomenal performer and is actually very involved in planning and putting together this conference this year. And we thank her for all her energy that she puts into it.
And then also you got Hiawatha Johnson.
Hiawatha Johnson Jr., we have David Parr, we have Paul Prater, Paul Nossinger, Zeke Powers, the incredible Professor BC, and a whole bunch of other performers we have not even announced yet, including local talent as well.
I think this is going to be, again, another fantastic conference. And the fact that you're holding in Baltimore, which is where the burial site is for Edgar Allan Poe, who was known as a macabre author, is phenomenal. And tell me, I understand it's just, as I recall, just a couple of blocks away from the Lord Baltimore Hotel that's hosting the convention.
That is correct. Yeah, the Lord Baltimore Hotel, of course, is a historic landmark hotel in downtown Baltimore. It was built in 1928, has a reputation for being haunted, of course. But it's also a beautiful luxury hotel filled with art pieces. The Art Deco design is incredible. The sky bar, you can actually do magic outdoors on top of the roof. And we are so excited to have everyone back again for this conference. We're really looking forward to, getting this one up and running. The lineup, the shows we have, including the popular gala show. Oh yeah, don't forget the Black Cat Lounge. You remember that, the after hours
event?
I do.
Right.
Yeah, that's right. Yes. Yep. So that's why the Black Cat Lounge is the reason we start late, like 10 a.m. in the morning, because you had to sleep off the Black Cat Lounge.
It's a good reason for doing that. And of course, there was a real life speakeasy that was behind the walls, and that was kind of cool the way this building was built.
That's correct. There's actually a secret speakeasy that was walled up for whatever reason that has been lost to history for over 70 years and is now a place that is used for wedding receptions and also secret magic, meetings and that sort of thing that we host there at the Lord Baltimore.
Well, Baltimore does have a rich history of magic. I'm going to be brief because I want to move on here just real quickly. But when we're walking from the hotel to the Edgar Allan Poe gravesite, there is the Demons Club. Tell me something real briefly about that.
Oh yes, the Demons Club was the original magic club in the United States. It predates SAM and IBM and included Thurston, Heller, Blackstone, Harry Houdini, Dante, and Alexander as regular members of this clubhouse in Baltimore City. We honor them as they border our stage at every Poe's Magic Theater show in Baltimore City. But those were the preeminent magicians of the golden age of magic, and they were all members of this Baltimore organization, Poe's Magic Club, a spiritual successor to the Demons Club.
And the building is still standing, which, as I said, is just a block or two away from the hotel.
That's correct.
Yeah, kind of cool. Well, there's so much to see and do. You want to make sure that you sign up for this conference. If you have not attended before, your magic will grow in you too by leaps and bounds, by learning how to put some storytelling into your magic and make it richer and more deeply interesting and motivating to your audience. So please check out the website at posmagicconference.com. Get information on how to register. The hotel rate has been reduced, especially for attendees. And there are other activities and things that are going to be happening all that weekend. Again, August the 21st through the 24th. You want to stay for all of it and then leave on Monday the 25th. There's just so much going on. Again, Vince, thank you very much for joining us here today and telling us about this wonderful conference.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful to put this on. It's wonderful to be on the show. Scott, you are also an icon. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much, Vince. And now back to our conversation with Diana Zimmerman. Well, speaking of meeting people, you have met and worked with and had written the definitive book on Siegfried and Roy. So you were good friends with Siegfried and Roy. Right. You had given a talk about that, but I was curious about how that you had first actually met them. I didn't hear your story.
The first time I met them, I'll never forget it. Dick and I came up to Las Vegas when they were at the Lido. And they were still doing the short act.
Just like the 12-minute act or something with the tigers.
With the birds. And one cat. Chico.
Okay.
They had Chico.
The same one from the
same one from
ship.
The ship. Yeah, okay. Chico. Chico had a good life. Yeah, I think Chico lived to be almost 20, which is pretty up there.
Pretty old for a cat.
Yeah,
must have taken really good care.
But So we went up. We wanted to see the Siegfried and Roy show.
Yeah.
So we went up to see the show, and you'll hear this story repeated so many times. And they came out afterwards, and we sat and talked, and and everything. And then later, I think it was one day that week, Gary Darwin, who used to have a magic club here in Las Vegas, and we all went over there, and Siegfried and Roy's sitting in the back with Irene Larson telling dirty jokes. They love to do that. And Siegfried and I are down front doing magic tricks. But that's how I first met them. And of course, with the animals and everything, my admiration for what they did. They single-handedly saved the white tigers and lions.
Right.
But they did so much more. I mean, I remember Johnny Thompson was performing at one of the shows that was on at the same time, and the air conditioning went off, and Johnny's birds all suffocated to death.
Oh, I hadn't heard that.
Just absolutely horrific, absolutely horrific. And Siegfried, because this is the kind of person he was, Siegfried would take his birds, send them over so Johnny could use them, because there's no way Johnny could do his act without the birds.
Right.
And then he would bring them back. He'd have a messenger bring them back. Then Siegfried would use them in his show, then take them back for Johnny's second show, then take them back for Siegfried's.
All the same night. Yeah.
And that's the kind of person they were.
Yeah.
They were just
giving people.
Incredibly giving. Roy would go out every Christmas and hand out blankets to homeless people. And he rescued every animal he could. It didn't matter. It didn't have to be a cat. It was a dog, an ostrich, a llama. The stories go on.
I know that menagerie in the backyard. It was incredible with all kinds of animals. It just wasn't the big cat exhibit.
No.
But they had all these other cages which looked better than zoos. Certainly the way they kept them. I mean, it almost looked like someone's bedroom in some of those places.
Yeah.
With ostriches and all these other things. I thought, wow, this is just
It's
amazing.
incredible. And in Little Bavaria, where they went after the incident, where they moved after the incident, because Roy could no longer climb upstairs at Jungle Palace.
And you say this called the incident, not the accident.
Yeah, he calls it the incident. He would not call it an accident. He said it's the incident. So in the book, it's the incident, and it's his own separate little booklet that explains his. But my admiration for them just continued to grow. They changed everything. There'd be no Cirque du Soleil here. They were the first people to do, back then, review shows were variety. The variety acts were basically an excuse for the dancers to go change costumes. So they were kind of a throwaway. But Siegfried and Roy were so powerful, they eventually moved to doing like a 25-minute, I think, slot at the end of the show. And then, of course, they got their own shows and everything. But they really changed the game. They were the first variety act that people actually would go to a review show to see that act. And, of course, then they went on to do the Frontier and, their career just...
the Folie Bergère.
The Follies, the Follies. And they went on to do Don Arden's show, and just... I mean, they really did change the game. They were the first... They broke the color line. They insisted that their dancers, whether they were black, white, or whatever, were not going to have to wear a helmet or
not be in the back of the dance
not be in
troupe.
the back of the dance line. They were the very first to have a review show that kids could come. They had because all the review shows were topless at that time. And Siegfried said, "No, we will have a show that kids can come to." And so on Friday, early show, it was a family show because they were so. Because of people that had helped them and because of everything that had happened to their lives, growing up with abusive fathers and everything, both of them, they were so truly vested in people. The story after story after story of people saying, when I met them, he spent time. I was talking with Les Arnold and Dazzle, wonderful, wonderful. And we were talking at dinner and Les was saying, here's these two kids, he and Ron Anderson had come up. Here's these two kids. And Roy came out after the show and spent all this time with us. He didn't know us from anybody. We weren't anybody, I mean, I could maybe see with me because Dick was, a renowned inventor of magic but they were that way with everybody. They were just extraordinary people. So,
well, it's like everyone also who worked with them, and it was a family.
It was
to the point where, and I have a friend who worked. It was one of their prop masters who I knew for a long time in Houston, moved to Vegas, and anyhow started working with them. And he said there are things that, as close as we are, Scott, in our relationship, I can't tell you. I don't want to discuss because there are things that are outside the family, and the family keeps to ourselves. Again, it was not a work relationship kind of a boss and subordinate kind of a thing. And it was very unique.
Very family. In fact, today, Lynette won't do most Lynette Chappelle, who was there, I call her the and in Siegfried and Roy, because she was so pivotal. She was the third Siegfried and Roy. And just an amazing, remarkable woman. And she won't do interviews about Siegfried and Roy. She just said, no, that's off limits. I know why they want me. They want me to tell something scandalous or something. She said, that's off limits. The respect for that family and for who they were. Sadly, it wasn't so much the case with his attorney and with his manager. They didn't. It was a little different, but I don't want to go into that.
Yeah, okay. No, I understand. And I'm sure you have a lot of different stories. I never went backstage, but I had heard there in the Mirage, I guess, that their dressing room was as larger than most people's homes.
Oh, yeah, it was. And everything about Roy, much more so than Siegfried, but everything about Roy was a showcase. He used every opportunity to show how successful they were, but not in an arrogant way, in a very subtle and wonderful way. And so you'd go backstage and their dressing room was probably as big as most people's homes, you know, and very beautifully decored and with the cats, you know, pictures of the cats and everything. Their home was the same way, the beautiful paintings on the bedroom walls and everything. And of course, they were both Catholic, so there was a little chapel in their homes. And so they're just extraordinary people.
Well, during one of the Las Vegas Desert Seminars, we had all gotten to go to their home. So I got a tour of that. By what was the guy who was the black gentleman who was with them all the time? And
yes. What was his name? I'm trying to remember.
Not Antonio, but I can't remember what.
It's gone out of my brain too. So.
But he was our guide, basically, taking us to all these rooms. When you're talking about all of the paintings that were on the ceiling and the walls and whatever and around, I mean, it was just an amazing. One of the things I do remember, and I had taken a picture of that, and I still have a copy of this, was Roy's bed upstairs on the second floor, where he had this charging elephant that photo picture above his bed, but his bedposts were these large tusks, and they had been taken after they realized, hey, we shouldn't be doing this, and that's all been taken down. So you can't, now it's just the bed with that picture back there. But I've got a photo that shows.
Oh wow!
Big
I'd love to
tusks.
see that. Oh my goodness, no. They were without Siegfried and Roy, this would be a very different town. And
you said something really important, I think, without Siegfried.
Oh, this is my favorite quote from them. Roy would say, without Roy, there would be no Siegfried. To which Siegfried would always answer, but without Siegfried, there would be no Roy.
Great.
I mean, they had that sense of humor. Siegfried was very funny, very funny. Roy was more serious and, reflective. But Siegfried, actually, when he was a kid, worked as a stand-up comedian. I don't know how funny he was, but he did. But Siegfried was also incredibly shy. I had him come lecture for my juniors, and he was pacing. I said, what's wrong? He said, I'm so nervous. What if they don't like me, Diana? I said, Siegfried, you're Siegfried.
Yeah.
Everybody's... So when he got done, I mean, had a great time with the kids, talking to the kids. He spoke to them at Brookledge. Bill and Irene Larson saw him in the theater there. And we had a special meeting just for him. And when he got done, he walked off stage, and the kids, of course, gave him a standing ovation. They were just cheering and applauding. And he looked at me, don't ask me ever again to do this. Makes me too nervous.
And that was the last time.
That was the last time that he...
First and last.
I asked him a couple other times to do it. No, Diane, it just makes me too nervous, Diane. Channing Pollock was like that.
He was nervous too.
Was like
I had heard that he was a shy individual. I met him a few times, and I had photos taken with him, but I never really had a substantive conversation with him.
Well, Channing, when he married Corey, she was very, very wealthy. And and she didn't like magic, and she didn't like magicians. And they had a beautiful home in Truesdale Estate. But the minute she'd go out of town, Channing would, Diane and Dick, I'm coming over. And Channing would come to the house, and he'd be 4 a.m, we'd be chatting. Finally say, Channing, we got to go to bed. But Channing was also very, very shy. And I asked him, how did he develop the character for his act? Because he had that incredibly suave and incredible. He said, to be honest, Diana, I was so scared to walk out there that the only thing I could think of was to be more blasé than the people in the nightclubs I was entertaining. So he developed that aloof kind of, attitude. Because he was scared. Yeah. And it was a cover-up for being, these people, the clubs that he worked in Europe and, in Paris and all these clubs, these were very wealthy people.
Highfalutin people.
And Channing was a middle-class kid, and...
it's kind of like, what am I doing here? So he's got to act this way, the way they are.
Interesting thing about Channing always wanted to do an act with big cats.
Really?
Yeah, most people don't know that.
I could not imagine that.
Back in the 50s, he had this vision of doing an act with big cats. Because, he did the doves and everything. Sure. But he wanted to expand it out. He tried his hand at acting, wasn't any good at that. So, But he'd always wanted to do an act with big cats. So when Siegfried and Roy came along, he was like, this is the kind of an act I would have done, but differently in his style. But yeah, nobody could ever do what they did.
The kind of style that he has, it is kind of a Chavez school of magic type of a thing.
That's where he's trained, in Chavez.
Yeah, but
Marion,
how was it that he was able to be successful as opposed to Norm Nielsen whenever the agent told him saying, I've just got 26 other people who've got the same act, go back and do something. And so that's why he developed then the music with the coin ladder and the violin instead of the regular zombie and everything. Why is it that Channing was able to find success with what I'd call a standard Chavez act?
That is probably one of the most incredible questions ever asked. Why is it that one person doing a card trick like Mike Rangel doing a card trick can have you in tears and somebody else can't? And it goes back to story. Now you say, but wait a minute, Diana, Channing was a silent act.
Silent act.
It was a silent act. He didn't talk. Well, he did. He screamed. And when I say his character, think about the 1950s when Channing was started. Blasé, everybody's smoking. There's, this kind of,
like
superficial, post-war, superficial elegance. Elegance. Now, magic has always been popular. But now you get this incredibly good-looking, incredibly charismatic act. I mean, you mentioned Norm Nielsen. Norm Nielsen was handsome, but he wasn't like blow away charismatic.
He wasn't a goddess or a god,
no, and like. Channing was, and to the max. And you have this incredibly good-looking guy who comes out and says, and he'd produce a bird so effortlessly it would just appear, and everything. And look at what I can do, and you guys can't. And that's what kind of was going through his mind. And you think you're so important? Watch this, this. And plus his assistant, I got to understand the psychology of his assistant. His assistant was always dressed in black, never a blonde assistant, always darker, not like a Marvin Roy with Carol and all that, always in the shadows, never upstaging. And so he was just, and he just radiated charisma. I mean, the women were just nuts over him and the man wanted to be like him. In a way, he was kind of a James Bond kind of a character. He had that primary characteristic, as Stanislavski would say, of just being the epitome of elegance. This is the epitome of elegance. So it was the story that he told when you watched him without speaking, but it was a story. It was the emotional feel that you would get. Oh my God, a god just walked into my room and he's now doing miracles for me. That was the secret to Channing. Yeah. Yeah.
Very well put.
Yeah.
Going back to Siegfried and Roy for a moment, you had also told a story about Michael Jackson, who was good friends with Siegfried and Roy also, and writing music for him.
Well, what happened was that Michael loved magic. Now, I didn't know Michael, but my art director on the book was very good friends with Michael Jackson.
I know he had a lot of people like Mike Amar, and Franz Ferrari and other people who hung out at his house.
Oh, yeah.
They just talked magic all the time.
He loved magic. Yeah. He really did. He was a kid at heart,
Yeah.
And he just loved magic. So he was great friends with Siegfried and Roy. He'd come to all their shows and seen all their shows and, and everything. So one day he wanders into the rehearsal at the Mirage, and Roy is so frustrated. I can't find the right music, Michael. I cannot find they didn't have their whole opening music. They were supposed to open on New Year's Eve, and here's a couple months later, and they still don't have the opening music.
Wow.
And he said, so Michael said, well, what do you want? And so Roy described what he wanted in it. So Michael Jackson's listening to this, and Roy's still frustrated and goes away. 3 or 4 days later, Michael Jackson walks in with a CD, and he says to their rehearsal again, and it was a closed rehearsal, so a lot of people didn't get in it. And he said, this is for you. And Roy goes, what is this? He said, this is your opening music. And Roy rushes over to the sound guy and says, put this on. And it was exactly what Siegfried and Roy wanted.
They just looked at each other, I'm sure.
It was fully orchestrated, written, fully orchestrated. I mean, this incredible piece of music. And that became their opening music at the...
for their whole run.
For their whole
Mirage.
run at the Mirage,
yeah. That's incredible. I know that he really did enjoy magic, Michael Jackson did. And I have heard that song many times. I know exactly what you're talking about.
It was a powerful piece of music. Michael was I didn't know him, but like I say, I knew people that did. He was an incredibly sensitive and perceptive guy, but he was also an incredibly talented, as we know. I don't know about all the political stuff and all the political stuff. I don't care.
Right.
The man was an amazing man. I know he helped a lot of people.
Yeah, in many ways, certainly did. And did Siegfried and Roy have some sort of a charity or some fund that they helped?
Yeah, they had their Sarmati charity. And of course, they gave a lot of money to animals. They were single-handedly, as I said, it's for saving the white tigers and white lions, and they gave a lot of money to charity. In fact, Monocore, the cat that actually, was involved in the incident that Roy called it, when he was injured, Steve Wynn gave Roy the plane so he could fly down and pick Monocore up. It's the only one of the cats in the show that Roy did not raise from being a little cub, wasn't born there. And he was being badly abused in some kind of a circus down in Mexico. So Roy went down and got him and brought him back. And he was known as the lifeguard. Monocore was known as the lifeguard because he would separate the other little kittens, the cubs, from fighting and everything. A 600-pound lifeguard. But he was such a beautiful animal. But yeah, what was the question again?
No, I was talking about the different funds that and you said the Sarmati Fund, and just so people understand, that's Siegfried and Roy, Masters of the Impossible.
Yeah,
that's the
and
acronym
they gave
for
a lot of
Sarmati.
money to animal charities.
Yeah.
They were very involved. Roy changed the game when it came to training animals. I mean, he truly changed the game. It went from whips and treating them with abuse and bad. And if they'd hear of an abused animal, they would either buy the animal, like he bought the horses and saved them. He couldn't buy the horses, so he bought the whole land they were on.
Right.
And built little Bavaria, and then planted trees every night after the show.
And then you said, unfortunately, that little Bavaria got mowed over, basically.
Heartbreaking.
After all the trees that he grew.
I was in tears reading that. So many wonderful. We spent hours there recording them and talking them and walking around in this beautiful. I mean, this was a piece of desert land. And every night after the show at like 2 or 3 a.m., Roy would go out with his little bucket of water and a shovel, and he would dig holes and plant trees until it became a Bavarian forest.
Right.
And it's torn down.
Yeah. That's too bad.
It's
I would like for you to share the story as we start to wrap up over here on the incident itself. I mean, there have been different variations on this, and you kind of quite literally wrote the book that's out there on that. So people are looking at this as being forever in the future that they can refer back to of that happening. So I just wanted to have that.
I am not sure we'll ever
here.
know the truth. I mean, you rarely know what's in the mind of a 600-pound tiger. But I can tell you what the official story from Roy is, which is what's in the book, because that's what Roy asked me to put in the book, and I respected him. And the official story is that he fell, Roy fell, and Monocore came over to rescue him, tried to drag him off stage to rescue him. Now, there is some truth in that, because if you look at the way a tiger kills animals, I mentioned earlier that Monocore was the lifeguard, that he would break up fights, and he would grab the cub by the neck and take the cub away and then growl at him to be good behave.
Right.
So if you look at the way that cats kill animals, they don't kill them by biting them. They kill them by shaking them. Like they'll attack an impala and they kill them by shaking them. Not a nice way to die, but whatever. Monocore didn't do that. He did not shake Roy. I think what happened, my version, and this is just my version, Roy had been having mini strokes, some mini strokes.
TIRs?
Huh?
I think they're called TIRs.
Yeah. And that night before the incident happened, before the show, which was Roy's term for it, by the way, they had been out drinking. It was Roy's birthday, and they had been partying all night and having a great
60,
time. Huh?
Did you just turn 60 or something? Was it
something.
It was a major date.
Something like that. I should know that date. So I'm glad you told me. I'm glad you told me. But they'd been out partying all night, and so and then the trainer, and I think this is where Monocore. Animals are very intuitive. They can tell. I mean, there's animals that could sniff out cancer. There's animals that know. Your dog probably knows when you're not feeling well.
Right.
I think the reason why Monocore was so upset, this is my belief, and I think Roy agrees with this too, is why Monocore was so upset, because the trainer said, don't take Monocore out tonight. He's upset. And Roy said, oh, Monocore will be fine. He'll be fine. I don't think you should take Monocore out. No, he'll be fine. And I think the reason why Monocore was so upset was because I think he sensed something in Roy wasn't right. They can do that.
They can.
And Monocore knew that Roy saved his life, And so I think what happened, just my opinion, I want to reiterate that, is that Roy had a stroke on stage and fell. And I think Monocore, sensing something wasn't wrong, leaped toward him and then grabbed him like he would a cub to pull him off. Well, when he did, he hit that artery in his neck. What is it called?
Carotid artery.
Carotid artery. And of course, blood was everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, the audience was going crazy and screaming. Now, there is a tape of it, but I don't know if it'll ever be released.
No.
But of course, then, they got out there, they got Roy right away, and they got him off stage. And of course, they use a fire extinguisher sometimes if the cats get something. So they got the fire extinguisher out, and Monocore kind of looks around. Lynette described this, and Roy described it too, because Roy was awake and he kept saying, "Don't hurt Monocore, don't hurt Monocore." And so the Monocore kind of looks around, and then he kind of turns around and walks back into his little cage where he knew he was, as long as he saw Roy was okay.
Right.
They get Roy within 3 or 4 minutes, the ambulance was there. They get Roy into the ambulance, and he's still awake. He's still alert. Don't hurt Monocore. Please don't. He was worried they were going to do something to Monocore.
Euthanize him.
Yeah. So they get it, and they're on their way to the hospital when a train comes and stops them. They were delayed about 5 minutes. And during that time, Roy's brain began to swell.
Mm-hmm.
It was starting to swell. And by the time they got to the hospital, they realized that the only way they could save his life, so tragic, was to cut away that portion of his brain that controlled speech and walking.
Walking.
And that's why they knew the show was going to close. They knew that night that there would be no more show. And so they did. And so, but Roy defied both of them. He defied both of them. He was talking, slurring. He did slur his words, but he got better and better. And he actually rode his horse, but he still hadn't walked. And he was in 6 months at UCLA down in Los Angeles. And then he came back to Las Vegas when he was stronger. Still, but he refused to say that he could never walk. So he would have therapists exercising his legs to keep the muscles strong and everything. Even though they kept saying it's no point, it's no use. So one day they had to put down one of his beloved cats, and Roy said he wanted to go out to see the cat. They're back at Jungle Palace now, and the cat saw Roy. Sorry, this makes me cry every time I tell this story. And the cat, who was very feeble and shaking, couldn't even stand, managed to stand, and one step at a time managed to make its way over to Roy. I mean, shaking and frail, and Roy said, they started to push Roy over to the cat. And Roy said, "No, if she can walk, I can walk." "Roy, you can't walk. You can't. If she can do it, I can do it." So they hold my arms. So they held his arms and helped him up. And Roy, barely moved 1 foot, and he got his 1 foot to move. And then he got his other foot to move. And he actually, with them holding him, walked over to the cat. And he loved the cat, and he pet the cat. And then the cat turned around and walked off and died.
Wow.
And that's how Roy walked.
Wow.
I mean, it shows you that we don't know. Don't let anybody tell you. Don't ever let anybody tell you you're going to die. Don't let anybody tell you that. We don't know. We don't know what this incredible thing in our head, that brain, can do. And we know science and we understand it. And I understand where the doctors, Larry Ruvo, who's the head of the, clinic that, does all this work on brain and stuff. They know that, but they don't know what we're capable of. And nobody knew what Roy was capable of.
Right.
Most amazing man in the world, in my opinion.
Great story. Well, we're going to wrap up. I just have one more question, or 2 more questions, actually. But that is, I guess, about what you're working on. You are, again, as I mentioned, just a force to be reckoned with. There's so many different things. You're working on producing things and I know there's things you can't talk about because they're still in the works or whatever, but are there any things that
Well, a few years back, I wrote 3 best-selling fantasy adventure novels. Secret of the Mist, and they're all, everything I do is about magic, but sometimes it's fantasy magic, sometimes it's other kinds of magic. So I wrote those, and then when I closed my corporate communications agency, which is what I did after that, I decided that I wanted to learn to write scripts.
Yeah.
And so I teamed up with an incredible script writer, Stephen L. Sears, who wrote Xena Warrior Princess and a lot of really incredible TV shows. And he fell in love with the story, and I began learning to be a script writer. So we're now in the process of getting a final movie script ready for that.
Wow.
And we have some very fabulous people who want to represent it. So we're working on that. I'm working on another television project, which was just optioned. And so we're very excited on that, which is about the history of women and women who use the magical arts to do things. So we're working on that. I'm also working on another movie that's involved in magic that I can't go into right now. So that's where I am in my career. Right?
Wow. I think it's incredible. I mean, and you're living the life of what you're preaching also, of telling people you got to keep moving. You got to have something to look forward
to. If I could leave people with just one thought, whatever your dream, I don't care if you want to be a doctor. I had a young boy in my junior program, and I asked him what he wanted to be. He says, I want to be a pediatrician to help kids. And I said, no, you don't, Justin. He goes, I don't, Diana. I said, no, you want to be the world's greatest pediatrician that changes the way we treat children so they can heal better and survive. And he looks at me and he goes, yeah, that's what I'm going to do, Diana. Whatever your dream, you want to be a pediatrician, you want to be a magician, that's your foundation. Don't let that be your ceiling. We are involved in the most incredible art in the world. We can use this art or this magical way of thinking to do anything we want to. And we're going to fail. Like I did a podcast for a business podcast a couple of days ago, and he said, Diana, what's your biggest failure? And I said, I've never failed. And he goes, oh, come on, everybody fails. I said, no, I've never failed. And he goes, okay, you got to explain that one. And I said, I haven't succeeded at certain things, but in everything I've ever done, everything in my life, I've learned something from it. I've learned I learned from Milt Larson. I learned from business and, Bill Larson. I learned from, all sorts of people. I mean, I remember Carly Fiorina when I was doing a lot of projects for Hewlett Packard. She said, Diana, you're like the best marketing people I've ever met. Where did you learn marketing? And I said, from a con man. You want to learn marketing? Study con man.
That's right.
Who could sell anything?
Good point.
But that's your foundation. We don't have a ceiling.
Yeah, don't let it be your ceiling.
No. So if anything, take that away from this.
You have just answered my second question, which was, what is your magic word? And that's it. You've defined that so eloquently right there about how to not have a ceiling. Don't let your dreams be your ceiling.
No, and don't look at failure as failure. It's not.
Right.
It's one more step to succeeding.
Success.
The knowledge I've learned every time I haven't succeeded in the way I wanted, everything that became difficult for me was, okay, how do I make this better now? I'll get rejection after rejection for things,
Well, you have certainly made our world better. You have impressed so many people and involved in their lives, and it has ripple effects beyond whatever you can
Well, there's a
possibly
certain
imagine.
gentleman I'm talking to that's done that as well.
Well,
what you do with these
I love you.
podcasts and how you're there's nothing more important than preserving history.
True.
And you're doing that. I mean, 50 years from now, 100 years from now, people are going to listen to this and they're going to, oh my gosh. And that's because
they're still relevant. I think,
relevant.
50 years from now, because they're truths, and truths remain constant.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
And I'm glad our friendship remains constant, too. I love you. Thank you very much.
Well, I love you, too. So
This has been a wonderful time. Thank you very much. So that has been my guest for the day. That was Diana Zimmerman. This is Scotty out. Wow. Thank you very much, Diana. Such great stories. What a great time we shared there. And I hope everyone else enjoyed this as much as I did. I appreciate the time that you gave us, all your words of wisdom and your years of experience encapsulated in just this short amount of time that we had to share with each other. And I thank you so much for that time. We've already talked so much about everything else that's been going on. I want to first of all thank my sponsor this week. That is Poe's Magic Conference. Don't forget to check out their website at poesmagicconference.com. Of course, that convention is coming up on August 21st through the 24th. So be sure to check that out, register, make it if you can. It'll be a lot of fun. And also, if you're in Las Vegas over July 9th, be sure to attend the Global Magicians group party they're going to be having. It sounds like just a lot of fun. I will mention that next week we will not be having a podcast on the regular scheduled time. That is on July the 10th. We will not be having a podcast release because I'll be in Italy. And just a few days later is when FISM is going to begin. And it will be just a week of back-to-back daily reports. So there's a lot of information coming up soon. So I just don't want to, I'll be overwhelming you enough and feeding you drinks of water with a fire hose during that week of FISM. So I'm just going to take a few days of a break before we begin that whole thing. So there will be no podcast released next week. But there will be a pod letter coming out, and if you have not yet subscribed to that, please do. And if you have not subscribed or liked the Magic Word Podcast, please do that also. You can do that easily enough if you just go to themagicwordpodcast.com and hit on subscribe whenever there's a place there pops up. It says join our pod letter. And also whenever you go to iTunes or whatever domain you use to listen to these podcasts, just give us a 5-star rating and some nice comments. That certainly helps our podcast to grow. That'll be greatly appreciated, along with any kind of a donation or pledge that you can make to us. That'll be wonderful. Well, we've had, again, a rather lengthy podcast, longer than normal, so let's start to wrap this up by just saying stay well, get booked, and do things. Don't let your dreams be your ceiling. And remember that failure is just one more step to success. This is Scotty out.